Unexplained terrors, 7 haunted nighttime recordings reveal sinister secrets exposed. Sarah's breath hitched as she scrolled through her feed, her fingers freezing over a post that burned into her mind. Urban legends, they called it messages from the dark. 7 nighttime recordings, supposed whispers echoing in the storm, linked to mysterious disappearances from decades past. She felt an ice-cold grip on her heart. Their sharp outlines called to her, urging her to unlock secrets wrapped tightly in fear. Could anything be more chilling? With exhaustion weighing her down after another grueling shift, she pulled out her earbuds. Curiosity gnawed at her as she tapped the download button. Within moments, she was engulfed in the sound of an unsettling rhythm, a blend of static and melodic whispers. "Help us." Goosebumps sprinted across her flesh, skin prickling under the unnerving curiosity that thrummed through her veins. Suddenly, she heard a noise that made her heart race. Tommy's soft whimpers drifted from the hallway, piercing the silence like a knife. "Mom!" he cried, his voice thick with terror. As she rushed to him, shadows danced along the walls, stretching and contorting in ways that didn't match the flickering light of the bulb above. "What's wrong, sweetie?" Her throat tightened. Tommy, usually so calm, shook beneath his covers, his eyes wide with unspeakable horror. Was it simply a bad dream, or had something reached from the deep crevices of darkness to grab hold of his mind? That recording, he stammered, hardly able to finish as tears spilled down his cheeks. "It talked to me, Mom." She tried to soothe him, brushing back his hair, but dread pooled in her stomach like a heavy stone. She wouldn't let whatever snared her son sink its claws deeper. That night, the shadows flickered just beyond their window. A faint echo pulsed through the night, whispering strange words. Familiar and terrifying was that her voice. Panic swelled within her as she shot up from the couch, racing to the window only to find it closed, locked tight. Her voice calling out in fear. Confusion rushed in like a tide, washing over her as she wrestled with reality. The uneasy feeling that she was no longer safe settled into the marrow of her bones. The day unfolded just as ominously. As she took her shift at the diner, her phone buzzed with frantic texts from her neighbors. They claimed to have heard her voice late into the night, whispers full of dread echoing through their walls. Just outside the diner, the community she once knew felt fractured, shadows lurking where light used to shine. Panic gripped her as she learned her home bore a chilling history. Every occupant had vanished without a trace. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Determined to dig deeper, Sarah approached her neighbors. Their faces twisted in fear, words caught in their throats as they exchanged glances laden with unspoken truths. Whispers of the recordings hung like a fog around them, thick and suffocating. Something darker tied them all together. Every night brought new recordings, and as the shadows seemed to inch closer, a sense of urgency seeped into her bones. The final recording echoed in her ears, whispering chilling revelations. They never left. The lights flickered, plunging her into pitch-black darkness. Breath caught, heart pounding, she knew the truth lay just outside her grasp. Flee. Confront it. Time ticked away, and Sarah felt a chilling presence press against her, the air thick with uncertainty. Would she uncover the sinister secret before it claimed her and Tommy? The steady thrum of rain drummed against the roof, a sinister lullaby weaving through the air as Sarah stood, paralyzed in the darkness. The last whispers still echoed in her mind, their haunting syllables twisting and curling, seeping into her thoughts like poison. They never left. Tommy's terrified face flickered through her memory, those wide, innocent eyes staring into an abyss she couldn't comprehend. She grasped the banister to steady herself, each creak of the wood beneath her hand a reminder that she was not alone. Shadows loomed in the corners, growing heavier, eager to swallow her whole. "Tommy?" she whispered, voice trembling, searching the darkness for any trace of her son. Panic set in as she thought of him, afraid and cloaked in unseen horrors. Catching sight of a flicker from the kitchen, she rushed through the house, heart racing, desperate to reach him. As she entered the kitchen, she found Tommy standing stiff, eyes glazed and unfocused, staring at something just beyond her line of sight. "Tommy!" she shouted, but he didn't respond. Instead, he slowly raised a trembling hand, pointing towards the window, where a dark figure loomed outside, its outline barely visible through the rain-soaked glass. Her breath hitched as terror gripped her. She stepped closer, straining her eyes to see. The figure stood motionless, silent as the grave. It was shrouded in darkness, its features indistinguishable, yet something primal warned her it was not human. "Sarah!" It spoke her name in a raspy whisper that curled around her like cold smoke. "Get away from the window." She leaped forward, shielding her son with her body, but Tommy remained frozen, lost in the pull of that dark voice. "Mom, I can hear it. It wants me." A shiver ran through her spine. How could he hear it? What was it offering? With fierce determination, Sarah grabbed Tommy's shoulder, gripping tightly. "No. You can't listen to it. We need to go now." But the whispers shifted and churned, drowning out her voice. Join us, join us." The faint echo slithered through the air, wrapping around them like a thick fog. Desperation clawed at her throat, she had to break his trance. "Tommy! Focus on me." Slowly, he blinked, as if awakening from a nightmare. The fog seemed to lift from his gaze, and she saw clarity return for a brief moment. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "What is happening?" "I don't know, but we need to leave this place. Now." She tugged at his hand, pulling him away from the window. Just as they turned to escape, a deafening crash shattered the stillness, the outside light flickering as the figure slammed against the glass. It was relentless, a shadow unfurling and stretching, its claws scratching the pane as if trying to claw them into the abyss. "Run!" she screamed, dragging Tommy toward the back door. Each frantic step thundered in her ears, adrenaline surging through her veins. As she fumbled with the lock, the creature unleashed a growl that rattled the very bones of the house. The door finally swung open, but the night air was thick and oppressive, each breath a struggle against the weight of dread. Outside, rain pelted down like arrows, and the sound of their pounding hearts drowned out the incessant whispering that still lingered in their minds. "Where do we go?" Tommy's voice trembled, panic flashing across his face as they stood in the chaotic storm. "Anywhere but here. We need to find help." As they made their way down the trespassing road, the whispers morphed into echoes around them, circling and tightening like a noose. The urgency pulsed in her chest as desperation surged. Would they ever escape the clutches of that dark entity? Then a sudden realization hit Sarah. She'd left the recordings at the house. "Tommy, I need to go back," she said breathlessly, fear churned in her gut. "I have to find them." "Are you crazy? We can't go back." But deep down, she knew there was no stopping this. The recordings were the key. And if they held the power to link them to that entity, she had no choice but to confront it. "Stay close," she said, shoving past her fear as dread and determination melded into a singular purpose. As they turned back toward the ominous house, shadows flickered in the distance, moving in tandem with the rising storm, a race against time, one she prayed they could win before the darkness swallowed them both whole. The rain lashed against them like 1,000 tiny daggers as Sarah and Tommy made their way back to the house. Each thunder crack felt like a warning siren, echoing the dread gnawing at her heart. Up ahead, the silhouette of their home loomed, swallowed by shadows and fury, waiting like a beast ready to pounce. "Mom, please, we don't have to do this." Tommy's voice trembled with fear. His small hand squeezed hers, but she pressed on. She could feel the weight of fate pulling her back, urging her to find answers, even if they might lead to their doom. The front door creaked open at a mere brush of her shoulder. It seemed to welcome them back with a sinister enthusiasm, as if the house craved their presence now more than ever. In the entryway, the air felt alive, thick with an unspeakable energy. Each step into the darkness sent a wave of goosebumps down her arms. The whispers began again, curling closer, hinting at truths she didn't want to hear. "Stay here," Sarah instructed Tommy, glancing back with what she hoped was a reassuring smile. "I just need to grab the recordings. Don't leave me." "I won't be long," she whispered, moving deeper into the house. The living room was a labyrinth of shadows, the familiar furniture now resembled grotesque shapes, twisting in the dim light. The silence was deafening, but only moments later, the growl from the creature echoed through the walls. It sounded closer, more menacing, its breath fading into a chilling wind that sent shivers down her spine. Fear prickled her skin, but she had come too far to turn back. "Damn it," she breathed, moving toward the staircase. The recording device sat uselessly on the second floor, and with each step, the whispers grew louder, jagged shouts demanding her attention. What did they want? What truth lay hidden within the recordings? "Find us, join us," echoes of torment ensnared her mind. She pressed her hands over her ears and continued, determined not to give in. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched before her like a gaping maw. It was there where she found the door to Tommy's room slightly ajar, the door frame shadowed and ominous. She hesitated, should she just grab the recordings and leave? But there was Tommy's innocent face etched in her memory, the pull of his trust propelling her forward. That door had been a threshold between their safety and the darkness beyond. Pushing it open, she froze. Inside, the room felt alive. The walls seemed to breathe, the air thick with anticipation. The window rattled with the storm's fury, yet it was not the weather that sent a chill through her bones, it was the reflection in the glass. A figure loomed behind her, a grotesque distortion of despair and rage. "Sarah," the voice echoed, deep and mocking. It was the entity. She swiveled around, heart hammering against her ribcage. "Get out!" She screamed, but her voice was just a whisper swallowed by darkness. The recording device lay in the corner, casting an eerie glow. She lunged for it, every instinct screaming to hurry. As she pocketed the device, the figure stepped closer, shadows spilling from its form like ink in water. "You shouldn't have come back, Tommy." Panic laced her voice. She spun towards the doorway, but the view started to twist and distort as if the house itself was conspiring against her. "Not safe," the entity rasped, voice deepening, threatening to swallow her whole. With one last frantic push, Sarah barreled through the door and into the hallway, terror spurring her feet to move faster. Yet, as she reached out for the staircase, she felt something pull her back, cold fingers grasping at her ankle, dragging her down into the abyss of despair. "No!" She screamed, determination surging. She desperately wrenched her foot free, but the laughter of the entity echoed through the house as she stumbled backward. Finally, she saw Tommy standing there, eyes wide with terror. "Mom, it's coming." His voice broke through the fog of panic. It was now or never. They had to escape. As they bolted for the stairs, the air grew thick with the whispers and growls of the creature, a frenzy clamoring for their essence. With each step, the house shook, walls breathing in their fear, the whispers swelling around them like an angry tide. "Mom, hurry!" But she could feel the darkness clawing at them, the shadows writhed and danced. Something was coming, something that wouldn't let them go. Was this the end? Or just the beginning of an unspeakable nightmare? They raced down the staircase, each step echoing like thunder in the chaotic silence of the house. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps, her heart pounding like a war drum, matching the storm outside. The shadows surged around them, stretching and coiling, aiming to snare them in their suffocating grip. "Mom, where are we going?" Tommy's voice quivered, laced with fear. "Out! We need to get out!" Sarah shouted, hardly recognizing her own voice. It was raw, frantic, desperate. Suddenly, the door to the living room slammed shut just ahead, its heavy thud confirming that escape would not be so simple. The air crackled with foreboding, and Sarah felt a chill race down her spine. No, no, no. She threw herself against the door, feeling the solid would tremble in response to her force. Let us go. She screamed, but the only reply was a chorus of grotesque whispers echoing back, a million voices wailing in utter despair. Behind her, shadows twisted, swirling together to form shapes once familiar, now twisted and warped beyond recognition. She caught glimpses of faces, lost souls who had come before, tormented by the entity that haunted their home. A slick fear threatened to pull her under, but she shoved it aside. She couldn't let Tommy see her weaken. Hold on, buddy. With one last desperate shove, Sarah felt the door yield slightly, the wood creaking in protest. She pushed harder, throwing her weight against it, and felt it crack open just enough. Tommy, push. Tommy's small body collided against the door, and together they burst through the threshold and into the living room. The room greeted them with a cacophony of haunting moans and laughter threading through the darkness. The windows rattled as if the winds themselves were trying to enter and join their madness. We have to reach the front door, she shouted, grabbing Tommy's hand tight. Tangled whispers wafted toward them like a thick fog. Each word was a serrated knife cutting into her resolve. Stay, join us, Mom. Tommy tugged at her arm. It's too late. They want us. No, she hissed, steadying herself. We will not become like them. Fear surged through her, tougher than the shadows encircling them. They sprinted across the room, only to be met by the sight of the front door now ominously ajar, a dark portal that hinted at both salvation and the unknown. The storm outside roared, and the violent winds howled almost in celebration of their dread. As they reached the door, the haunting figure materialized just beyond the threshold, ethereal tendrils reaching out like skeletal fingers. You can't escape, you belong. Sarah's breathing quickened. This was it, the final stand. Run. She shoved Tommy ahead of her, forcing her resolve to ground itself in a fierce need to protect him. Moments felt like hours, the doorframe closing in around them, but they were almost through. Then, a scream pierced the air, a wretched sound that froze Sarah in place. It was the entity. It wasn't just a voice, it was someone they knew all those years ago. It had claimed a part of their family. Tommy spun around, panic erupting on his face. Mom, we can't leave you. Yes, you can. Go. Sarah pleaded, backing toward the specter looming closer. I'll hold it off. The moment hung in the air, suffocating. The shadows twisted in anticipation, eager to snatch them back into the darkness. Mom, Tommy's voice cracked. Go. Sarah screamed, her fists clenched. The room quaked, a battle between light and shadow swirling about them. A dangerous flicker of hope ignited deep within her. But then, without a moment's warning, Tommy hesitated, eyes wide as he looked beyond her. Mom, it's behind you. Spinning around, Sarah's breath caught. The entity surged forward, an abyss of despair, with the familiar face of a lost loved one, a twisted reminder of everything they'd lost. Join me, it called, an unsettling mix of grief and desire. As the darkness surged toward her, she braced herself for the engulfing shadows. Was this the end? Or was it just the beginning of something far worse? With one final scream of defiance, she lunged for Tommy, but the entity's icy grip clasped her arm, pulling her into its depths. In that moment, she realized what she had to do. Tommy, run. Save yourself. And then they were gone, leaving behind only echoes and shadows as the storm outside raged on. What fate awaited her in the depths of the darkness? Would she truly be lost forever? The darkness swallowed Sarah whole. For a heartbeat, she was pulled into a void where sound evaporated, and all that remained was the pulse of her racing heart. It thudded helplessly against the silence. The chilling hands of the entity tightened around her, their coldness seeping into her flesh, dragging her deeper into the nightmare. Mom! Tommy's terrified voice echoed, distant and fading as she slipped away. She reached out desperately, but the shadows had twisted around her, blurring her world. Her thoughts collided in a cacophony of fear, longing, and dread. They wanted her, needed her to join their cacophony of despair. The faces of the lost danced before her, haunting smiles merged with sorrow and pleading eyes. Sarah pushed against the weight of darkness pressing down on her. I want tea. A sudden warmth shot through her, a flicker of light in the engulfing dark. The strong will she had for Tommy surged forth, fighting the entity's suffocating embrace. She focused on his face, his wide, innocent eyes filled with terror, and that flicker ignited into a blaze within her. Tommy. She called back, feeling the raw power of her love reaching out. I'm still here. The entity recoiled slightly, giving her a moment of breath, a moment of clarity amidst the chaos swirling around her. Clenching her fists, she visualized the front door, the storm outside brighter than the shadows. It was the way home, a path to safety. But how? The lost souls screamed around her, clawing at her resolve. Stay with us, they wailed, their voices overlapping in a sinister symphony. You belong here. Images of her life flashed through her mind, the laughter, the warmth of family dinners, the soft hug of Tommy. Each memory was a lifeline, pulling her away from the abyss. No. With a ferocious will, she ripped her arm from the grasp of the entity. It felt like tearing flesh, but she fought through the pain. You are not my family. You do not own me. The shadows shuddered at her defiance, twisting and fuming as if the very fabric of the nightmare was unraveling. She felt a rush of air, the whisper of freedom. Tommy. The word emerged like a prayer, a plea in the storm of despair. She saw him again, small and vulnerable. He was standing at the threshold of the living room, trembling and torn between fight and flight. Mom. His voice was small and panicked, a beacon of light amidst the shadows. Come to me. Sarah called out, extending her hand, forcing her legs to move toward him. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for him, fighting against all the shadows that had haunted their family for years. Suddenly, a great roar filled the room. The entity screamed, its voice growing into a chaotic crescendo. You will join us. The walls began to close in, the air thick with malice, but Sarah stood her ground. As if sensing her strength, the storm outside howled louder, its wrath bashing against the walls, shaking loose the very foundation of the house. The shadows around her faltered, momentarily in chaos. In that moment of distraction, Sarah dashed forward. With a single leap, she closed the distance between them, scooping Tommy into her arms just as the entity twisted back toward her, face set in rage. Mom, we have to, I know. She pressed on, surging toward the door, heart pounding with each step, every pulse pushing away the shadows that clawed at her retreat. They were almost through, almost free, when the entity lunged one last time, shrieking with a fury so intense it jarred her bones. It latched onto her ankle with a grip of ice, its face twisting into something unrecognizable, filled with grief and rage. Leave her alone. Tommy shouted, and in his voice was a strength that shook the very floor beneath them. Every word propelled them forward, fueled by the bond between a mother and her son. Sarah gritted her teeth, yanking her leg free with one mighty pull, bursting past the threshold. They tumbled out into the storm, the world outside shrieking with rain and wind. The door slammed shut behind them, rattling in its frame, a barrier between them and the horrors that lurked within. But as they stared at the storm, wild and unrelenting, Sarah felt an unsettling certainty in her gut. Was it truly over? The shadows behind the door whispered her name, calling her back into their depths. Though they had escaped the house, she could feel the entity still lingering, waiting, watching. Mom. Tommy's voice trembled beside her, ice-cold hands clutching at her jacket. What if it's not gone? What had they truly escaped? The storm roared, and the shadows seemed to retreat, but only by a hair. Sarah swallowed hard, unable to voice her fears. I don't know. As the darkness slipped further into the recesses of the house, a new terror lingered. If the entity had been so strong before, what would it do now that they were outside? And then, from somewhere deep within the storm, a familiar laugh echoed back at them, a twisted familiarity that curdled the blood in her veins. "Mom," Tommy whispered, eyes wide with dread. Was this nightmare far from over? The storm raged on, dark clouds swirling like ominous spirits above them. Sarah gripped Tommy tighter, her heart slamming against her chest. Every glance back at the house set icy fingers creeping up her spine. The door stood solid, yet she felt its presence like a forbidden whisper, calling her, taunting her with the promise of what lay beyond. "Mom, what was that?" Tommy's voice trembled as lightning split the sky, illuminating the jagged silhouette of the house for a haunting moment. "I don't know," she replied through clenched teeth, fighting against the unease tightening within her. "But we need to keep moving." They stumbled back, one foot in front of the other, away from the malevolent darkness. But the laughter echoed again, piercing through the roar of the storm. It was haunting, familiar and chilling. A sound that sent a wave of nausea washing through her. "Mom!" Tommy's grip tightened, his small hand trembling against her jacket. "I don't like this." "I know," she said, forcing calm into her voice, twisting it into something she hoped would comfort them both. "But we have to stay strong. We can't let it in." But the shadows seemed restless. They slithered into the periphery of her vision, cloaking the edges of her thoughts, swirling like smoke. She glanced back at the house, struggling to breathe. Could it feel them outside? The entity? Did it possess a will of its own, lurking behind that door, ready to tear them apart again? Suddenly, Tommy yanked her arm, his eyes wide with panic. "Look!" From the house, where the door's edges met the frame, a sliver of dim light flickered. Just a hint, a sign of life amidst the chaos within. And there it was again, a soft glow swirling, accompanied by the low hum of voices, a warped choir that sang her name, calling her back, promising her safety if only she'd return. "No!" Sarah cried, the dread choking her words. "It's a trick." But the flicker grew brighter, more enticing. With every heartbeat, it pulled her, like a moth drawn to flame. "Tommy, we have to move," she urged, forcing her feet to abandon the tempting glow. The wind shrieked around them, a bitter reminder of the imprisonment they had just escaped. "Mom, I can hear them," Tommy wailed. "The shadows. They want you back." His voice pierced through her fog, bringing her back. "No, they don't. It's a lie. Let's run." She turned, pulling him along with her, but her mind raced with the haunting visions that beckoned, memories twisted by darkness. As they pushed further into the storm, thunder boomed again, shaking the ground beneath them. The laughter mixed with the storm's fury, a cacophony of despair that chilled her bones. She stumbled, looking down just in time to see the water pooling beneath her feet, shimmering strangely, a collection of broken reflections. Images flickered, Tommy's smile, their backyard, but mixing with and overlaying those were chilling faces of the lost, mouths twisted into silent howls, reaching towards her pleading, accusing. "Mom!" Tommy screamed, jerking her back, breaking the trance. "Don't look at them. I'm trying." She gasped, collapsing to her knees in the mud that churned beneath them, pulsating as if alive. Fear bubbled within her, rising like bile. The air grew thick, suffocating, smelling of damp earth and dread. Shadows stretched towards them from the house, creeping like fingers of night. Their presence pressed into her, as if trying to carve their way into reality. Fear raced through her veins, adrenaline pushing her forward, and she pulled Tommy along, running blind into the storm. "Mom!" Tommy shouted again, this time pointing. "Where are we going?" "Anywhere but here." She gasped, barely hearing him over the thunder, but the path twisted, revealing a darkened copse of trees that loomed ahead, sheltering unknown terrors. It stood like a beacon of danger, a contrast to their desperate flight. "Mom, please. Stop." Tommy yanked at her arm, desperation spilling from his eyes. Just then, the storm wavered, as if taking a collective breath. The laughter and whispers faded, leaving an uncomfortable silence that draped over them like a shroud. Did they give up? Tommy's voice wavered. Maybe. Sarah hesitated, her instincts screaming to keep moving. Something deep inside her, however, began to uncoil, offering a glimmer of hope, a false sense of security. Before she could make the next move, a sudden crack, like a gunshot, echoed around them. The darkness rippled and throbbed, strips of blinding light spilling from the trees as if tethered to the entity's fury. "Mom, we should go." Tommy pulled again, a tinge of panic in his tone, a plea filled with urgency, but just then, they heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on wet leaves, echoing from the darkness within the woods, and a voice that was eerily familiar, enveloped in malice. "Back so soon?" The voice taunted, smooth and chilling. "I thought we were just getting started." The laughter returned, and with it, Sarah felt the darkness wrapping around her once again. What had they awakened? What hunted them now? The voice slithered through the air, curling around them like a serpent. Sarah's heart raced as she grasped Tommy's hand tighter, feeling the ice chill creep into her bones. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, resonating through the corrupted soil, taunting them from the shadows. "Mom," Tommy whispered, his voice dripping with fear, "it sounds just like I know." She cut him off, dread settling like a weight on her chest. It can't be. But she couldn't shake the feeling, the familiar tone, the sinister mockery that echoed memories she wished to forget. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the darkness to strip away the noise and light. "Run, Tommy!" she yelled, urgency bleeding into her voice as they sprinted toward the trees, desperate to escape the clutches of a nightmare-made flesh. A branch snapped behind them, and Sarah glanced back just in time to see a shadow dart into the underbrush. "Keep going!" she shouted, lunging forward. The wind howled with an almost alive fury, tearing through the trees, urging them on. The thick foliage of the woods seemed to swallow them whole, shadows clinging to every trunk, shadows that weren't only remnants of the night, but entities. Darkness wrapped around her, pulling at her jeans and mixing with the mud at her feet. Tommy stumbled, his small frame struggling to keep pace. "Mom! I can't see." His voice wavered, terror vibrating within each word. "Just hold on tight. We'll find a way out." She gasped, dragging him forward. But with each step deeper into the thicket, she felt the rise of that sinister laughter swell around them, echoing off the gnarled trees, a haunting chorus that made her skin crawl. "Mom," Tommy cried, sliding to a stop, the panic firm in his grip. "What if it gets us? What if it finds us?" "We can't think like that," she replied, crouching to his level. Rain poured down like silver daggers, stinging their faces, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "We'll keep moving. Together." With a trembling nod, he pushed himself back up, his tiny hand warming in hers as they resumed their frantic flight. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted, the earth becoming a treacherous slide. They stumbled as the wet mud turned to slick, grasping fingers, pulling them down. Sarah fought against the pull, her heart slamming against her rib cage. She turned, looking back, but the darkness was only a step away, swarming towards them in a feathery dance of malevolence. "Mom!" Tommy shouted just as suddenly, a break in his voice that sliced through the chaos. A distant light glimmered ahead, flickering like a beacon of hope. "Look!" He pointed, breathless. "There. We can go there." Tommy, wait, but he was already darting ahead, propelled by the glimmer that seemed to promise safety. "Tommy!" she shouted, but her warning was lost to the howl of the wind. The distance between them expanded, shadow fingers clawing at the ground like angry spirits. She ran after him, heart pounding as she pulled him close again, the light glowing brighter. As they reached the clearing illuminated by that strange light, the brightness flickered before them, revealing a figure cloaked in solidarity, its face shrouded in darkness. The laugh returned, a sound like shattering glass that made the trees shiver. It rose like smoke, swirling into the shape of a nightmare. "Welcome home," it hissed, voice a taunting harmony, blending with the wind's roar. Sarah gasped, reaching for Tommy, but too late. The ethereal shadow stretched its wispy fingers toward her son, who was now locked in a trance, captivated by the phantom. "No! Tommy!" She screamed, her voice bursting from her throat, unleashing the primal fear held deep inside. But as she lunged, more shadows surged around her, encircling them, pressing all hope into nothingness. Cold washed over her, and for a moment, everything stilled, a silence so profound it felt tangible, as if the world had paused. "Mom! Help!" Tommy's cries jolted her from the silence, the raw desperation igniting something inside her. She wouldn't let the darkness take him. Desperation fueled her movements as she barreled toward the figure, intent on tearing Tommy away, reclaiming him from the abyss, and then it vanished, leaving only a gust of wind in its wake. "Tommy?" she whispered, disbelief creeping in as her heart sank with the weight of her worst fear. He was gone, swallowed by the void. What had she done? What had they unleashed? The shadows swirled faster, thickening, shifting toward her as she turned, clamoring closer, and the laughter erupted again, deep, echoing through the trees. "Did you really think it would let you go?" The voice chirped, drenched in mockery. The shadows closed in, wrapping her in a suffocating embrace. Where had Tommy gone? What was lurking nearby, waiting just beyond the veil of darkness? Sarah's breaths came in jagged gasps as the shadows closed in, and she could feel the cold tendrils brush against her skin. Panic surged. She was trapped in a swirling nightmare without her son. "Tommy!" she screamed, her voice breaking, drowning in despair. The bushes around her rustled as if the very trees were leaning in to listen, to revel in her fear. "You'll never escape it." The mocking voice slithered through the air again, wrapping around her heart like a vice. She seized the moment, grasping onto memory, pulling deep from the pit of her being. The fear would not take her. To fight meant to push back against the shadows, to unleash a light buried beneath layers of dread. "I won't lose you," she cried into the enveloping black surrounding her, but as she shouted, the ground beneath her shifted again, a low rumble rolling through the forest like an angry sigh. Roots twisted and snaked around her ankles and she stumbled backward, falling to the damp earth. "Mom!" Tommy's voice echoed in the distance. It was faint, a whisper carried by the wind, but it drove her to claw her way up again, determined to follow that sliver of hope. "Tommy!" The thick fog of confusion had settled into the air, suffocating any rationality. Where had he gone? She fought to piece together the last moments, the shadow's snare, the laughter twisted in her mind. It was a game, a twisted dance that had separated them in an instant. The shadows darted close, whispering her son's name like an echo of long-lost memories. "Come home, Sarah," it beckoned, slick like oil, and she realized, horrifyingly, that it knew her deeper fears. Forcing herself to focus, she scanned the hazy darkness. Then, she saw it. A flicker, a pale light flickered ahead, but it was different now, dimmer, its glow tainted. Could it be another trick? With her heart racing, she took a hesitant step toward it, feeling weightlessness beneath her feet as if the ground tried to pull her back. "Tommy!" she called again, her voice stronger now. "I'm coming." With each step, the shadows recoiled, an anguished hiss sinking into the earth. What lay ahead remained shrouded in mystery, but the pull of that fading light clung to her spirit. She pushed against the shadows, feeling them peel away, just for a moment. As she reached the source, it revealed itself, a cracked lantern, its flickering flame shivering like a heartbeat, lying among gnarled roots, almost begging to be picked up. Instinctively, she reached for it. The moment her fingers wrapped around the cold iron handle, something jolted through her, a surge of warmth igniting her chest, but as the light brightened, illuminating the surrounding darkness, a shriek met her ears. Tommy's voice was mingled with the hissing shadows. "Mom! Help me! Hold on, baby! I'm coming!" She spun, the lantern swinging wildly at her side, illuminating the path ahead. Shadows shied away from the light, but no less malevolent, they shifted and writhed against the edges of her vision, deepening their grip on the night. "Can you see my son?" She cried into the abyss, feeling both vulnerable and defiant. The laughter faded into a near-silent murmur as the flicker of hope bloomed within her chest. The air thickened again, coated with dread. They were close, its icy fingers still reaching for her from the veil. With renewed determination, she dashed forward. Every step was a battle. The shadows clawed at her heels, drawing her back as she strained against the relentless darkness. Then she saw him. Tommy stood in the center of a small, illuminated clearing, eyes wide, face pale as if a candle had melted down to nothing. The shadows curled around him, wrapping tighter, drawing him into their twisted embrace. "Tommy!" She screamed again, pushing the lantern forward, heart hammering as the light spilled outward, refracted across the uneven ground. The shadows hissed at the light, screeching and darting away. Tommy's gaze flickered to her, confusion melding with terror. "Mom! Help!" But just as she opened her mouth to call out again, ice-cold hands sunk into her sides and pulled her back. Laughter erupting again, deep and malicious. "Did you really think you could take him?" The voice spoke through the cacophony, deeper than before, more powerful. Struggling against the oppressive grip, Sarah felt the lantern in her fist grow warm, vibrant. How could light fight against this dark entity that seemed to know her every fear? "Let him go!" she yelled, fierce as solid steel. But as she spoke, her resolve wavered, thoughts spiraling. What if it was too late? What if the shadows had already taken him? Suddenly, everything exploded in blaring darkness. That a deafening silence fell, as if the world had taken a deep breath, hanging on the brink of despair. But a whisper stirred in the silence, pulling at her heartstrings. The voice she thought lost. Mom, was he still there? What had become of Tommy? Would the shadows devour them both before she could discover the truth? The darkness pressed down like a thick, suffocating blanket, the silence wrapping around Sarah's heart. She could still hear Tommy's voice calling to her, faint but unmistakable. Gritting her teeth, she strained against the hands that held her, determination growing thicker than the shadows around her. "Tommy!" She cried once more, feeling the words scrape against her throat, raw with desperation. The chilling laughter ebbed, replaced with a mocking sigh that seemed to ripple through the very fabric of the night. The shadows whispered, taunting, twisting around her legs like serpents. "You think you can fight us? You've already lost." But deep within her, a flicker of defiance ignited. She raised the lantern high, its light pulsating with newfound vigor. The shadows recoiled again, their hisses becoming anguished cries. She was no longer just a mother lost, she was a beacon of defiance in a world devoured by darkness. "Let him go!" she shouted, the words echoing with heavy authority. She charged forward, pushing through the thick fog, her pulse racing, heart pounding with every step. She could see Tommy clearer now. He was glowing faintly, almost as if radiating an inner light. But that light was quickly being snuffed out, the shadows clawing and tugging at him, like a pack of wolves closing in on prey. Sarah tore down the dwindling distance between them, dread flooding through her veins. "Hold on, Tommy," she urged, her voice cracking but steady. "I'm almost there." "Mom! I can't." His voice choked off as the shadows tightened their grip, unwavering. Sarah plunged deeper into the clearing, the light from her lantern now a sudden flood, illuminating the twisted trunks and grotesque branches that surrounded them. The shadows hissed, a cacophony of fury and fear as they began to blur and flicker, momentarily losing their form. "Stay close to the light," she shrieked, the reality of what was at stake hitting her like a tidal wave. With a desperate lunge, she reached for Tommy, clawing through the thick tendrils gripping him. The moment her fingers brushed against his arm, the lantern flared to life, luminescence bursting forth, a shield against the encroaching dark. "Sarah!" Tommy gasped, his voice laced with a mixture of relief and terror. But as she pulled him closer, something shifted in the shadows. An inky blackness coiled around her, almost sentient, and she felt a sharp tug, pulling her back as if the very earth sought to reclaim her. "No!" she screamed. "You won't take him." Suddenly, a thunderous roar exploded behind her, the shadows screeching in retaliation as they withdrew. For the briefest moment, she felt the familiar warmth of Tommy's body against hers. It filled her with hope, but the darkness was swirling, relentless in its pursuit. "Run!" she urged, fear igniting within her again. "We have to go now." As they turned, the trees loomed high over them, twisting grotesquely against the sky. The sounds of the forest morphed into a nightmarish symphony, accompanied by whispers that promised despair, never-ending despair, but Sarah was fueled by a mother's love, pulling Tommy along as she navigated the maze of shadows. The path seemed to slip away from them, branches reaching out to claw at their backs, but they pushed onward, hearts racing in unison. Their path suddenly opened onto a wide glade, washed in the pale moonlight, a stark contrast to the swirling darkness. There was a momentary pause, the shadows halted at the edge, a monstrous barrier waiting, yearning to reclaim what it had lost. "Keep the light up!" Tommy shouted over the howls echoed through the trees, but just as they thought they could find safety, a chilling realization crept upon them. The clearing stretched wide, but at the far end loomed a huge, ancient tree darker than night, twisted and gnarled as if crafted from nightmares themselves. Whispers fluttered around it, enticing yet sinister, luring them closer. "Mom, what if we go back?" he asked, his voice trembling. She turned to him, the lantern flickering. "We can't. We can't go back." Yet, the shadows were gathering again. Their whispers intensifying, promising freedom and safe passage if they just took a single step into the darkness. Sarah's heart thudded, caught between the instinct to flee and the instinct to survive. "Stay close, Tommy," she murmured. But an echo tapped at the edges of her mind, teasing something she had tried to forget. What were the shadows truly seeking? What truths lay hidden within the tree that could make them whole or destroy them both? A terrible, powerful dread coiled around her heart as she took a breath. And suddenly, the whispers sharpened into a single word: Tommy's name. "Mom, let us go." But before she could turn back, something glided into view at the edge of the clearing, a figure cloaked in darkness, exuding a dreadful aura. "You've come to join us, Sarah," it purred, voice smooth as silk, echoing with unearthly delight. What fresh horrors lay in wait for them now? The twisted figure smiled, but deep down, she felt that the truth was just beginning to unfurl. The clearing pulsed with an eerie energy, shadows dancing along the edge like hungry predators waiting for night's embrace. Sarah's heart thundered as she clutched Tommy's hand tighter, desperate not to let go as the darkness bore down on them. "Stay close," she whispered, feeling the cold chill of the figure's gaze. It stood beneath the enormous tree, an ancient form wreathed in inky tendrils, glorying in its authority over the shadows. "Join us," it hissed, voice a velvet caress tainted with malice. "You know you belong here." But Sarah's soul flared with defiance. "I will never join you," she shouted, forcing every ounce of strength into her voice. The figure recoiled, the darkness swirling like angry smoke. The shadows that had threatened to consume them twisted back toward the tree, churning with trepidation as if the apparition had been bruised by her words. "You think you can escape?" it taunted, laughter echoing through the glade like a winter wind. Sarah took a breath, heart racing as her mind raced through memories: Tommy's laughter, his innocent joy. "Let him go," she shouted, raising the lantern high. The light flared, scattering tendrils of darkness like brittle leaves. In its glow, the figure faltered. Tommy trembled beside her, eyes wide with fear and hope. "Mom, it's too strong." "No," she urged fiercely, squeezing his hand. "We can't give in. Remember where we came from, Tommy. Remember the love that brought us here. That is stronger than any darkness." The corners of the performer's mouth twisted into a sneer. "Love will not save you. You only have to join us." The shadows surged closer, ensnaring the ground underfoot, hungry to wrap themselves around their ankles. "Fight it, Tommy," Sarah shouted. Side by side, they stood against the tide that bore down on them, resolute in their love for one another. She felt the warmth of his little hands trembling in hers, determined not to let fear take hold. Together, he shouted, taking a step forward, and they surged toward the tree. As they approached, the whispers grew louder, swirling urgently around them, begging for attention, promising safety. "Tommy!" she shouted, "remember our home." In response, Tommy squeezed her hand tightly, eyes set with newfound determination. "Mom! I want to let go." With that mantra guiding them, they rushed toward the giant tree. As they reached the base, Sarah swung the lantern forward, illuminating a sacred circle in the clearing. The shadows writhed and screamed, halting in their tracks, unable to breach the boundary of light. "We're not yours," Sarah yelled, drawing power from that conviction. The figure locked eyes with them, anger boiling to the surface. "This isn't over." It cried, reaching out as shadows mingled together, forming torrents of fury. They scattered like smoke at the light's touch. Desperation clawed at Sarah. This was their moment. "Tommy, look!" she shouted, pointing at a jagged mark on the tree. It resembled a door, its edges glowing faintly, a keyhole illuminating as if beckoning them. "Mom, it's a way out." Tommy gasped, running forward, his small feet hurriedly skirting past the lurking darkness. "Stay with me," Sarah yelled, urgency threading through every ounce of her voice. The shadows screamed as they lashed out, their howls violent, but the light from the lantern surged, wrapping them in an embrace of hope. "Mom!" Tommy reached the mark first, small hands pressing against it as his touch ignited brilliant warmth, beckoning through the shadows. "Do it together," Sarah cried, surging toward him. "Now!" They pressed their palms against the mark, the warmth spreading through them, entwining their essence. The clearing erupted into light, blinding and pure, a shield against the night and the entity that sought to consume them. As they grasped each other's hands, memories of their home flooded back, the comforting smell of baked cookies, warm laughter, and the love that had formed an unbreakable bond. Together, they shouted, unity surging with each heartbeat. In a final burst, a wave of energy erupted from the mark, blasting outwards and extinguishing the shadowy tendrils with a blinding glow. The entity screeched, its form flickering and dissipating like smoke in the wind, warping and twisting into an ethereal scream. And then silence. They were still standing, the shadows gone, warm light encircling them like a soft blanket, and the air felt crisp and clean. They turned to see the tree standing tall, now bathed in a gentle luminescence. "Mom!" Tommy whispered, looking around. Did we win?" Breathless and overwhelmed, Sarah nodded, tears of relief pooling in her eyes. "We did, Tommy. We're free." As they stepped away from the light, the darkness melted away, revealing a bright dawn breaking over the horizon. They stood together, holding each other tightly, knowing there would be no more shadows lurking behind them. "Let us go home," Sarah said, her voice steady, a calm settling over them as they stepped toward the warmth of the sun, toward their beautiful future, free from the chains of the past. But as they walked away, a whisper lingered in the air, soft and warped. "You can't escape, you are forever tied." Sarah's heart sank, but she squared her shoulders, refusing to let the words dampen her spirit. "Not today," she whispered, holding Tommy close as the sun bathed them in golden light, stepping confidently into a new chapter. Every shadow has its day. And today was theirs. Now that you've followed Sarah and Tommy's journey to triumph, be sure you subscribe immediately to catch our next exclusive stories. You need to stay updated, so don't lose out. Smash that like button now to help us feed the algorithm and keep this content thriving. We love hearing from you, so flood the comments section with your thoughts and reactions about the finale. And don't wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness how bravery conquers fear. Your support means everything.